At the moment, you're doing Batman Eternal, which is one of DC's new weekly titles. That changes the whole dynamic, I guess, of a comic book for a writer, but you're also collaborating on it with Scott Snyder. What's that like? How does it work?
Well, Scott and I sat down and came up with that story together about, at this point, about a year and a half ago. It was sort of February of last year. And it was something that we knew it had to be this huge story. We knew that if you're going to do something weekly, if it's going to be a 52-part story, you need a story that can only be told in 52 parts. So that's sort of where it started. And from there, we brought in an amazing group of writers. It's myself, Ray Fox, Tim Seeley, and for the first section of the story, it was John Layman, and now Kyle Higgins is helping us wrap it all up. So we have some of the best writers in all of Gotham, working with us on this project, and just we had the entire toy box to play with. But the biggest thing is it's been one of the easiest experiences I've ever had working in comics, shockingly.
Right.
Because, a standard comic only comes out once a month, and this comes out 4 or 5 times a month. It should be, by all reason, it should have destroyed me. Like, this should have been the project that, I'm cursing myself for having agreed to do every single day. But amazingly, we got really, really far ahead right at the start. And we're about, even though it's going to continue running weekly, I think the last issue will come out first week of April. We're going to, there are only 4 more issues that need to be written in the entire thing. So we are well ahead of schedule, and that gives us the opportunity to fine-tune and tweak across all of the different writers to make sure it's a seamless story from start to finish.
So how does it work? Do you all sit in a room TV writer style and spitball ideas, or do you all take chapters, or what's the story?
It's a bit of both. We started with a skeleton document that Scott and I put together, and we sort of did one of those for each of the 3 acts of the story. And from there, we then had, for each of the acts, we had a writer's summit with all of the creative team in there. And so that's where some major pieces in the story, for instance, we brought back a character who hadn't existed in continuity for decades, which was Julia Pennyworth, the daughter of Alfred. And we totally reinvented her. But when she was first brought up, it was in the room, and it at first I thought Ray Fox was crazy for saying we should bring her back, but then we were all talking about it, and it'd be like, oh, this is something the story's been missing. And so we seeded her through the whole thing and made one of her arcs one of the most important arcs. So a lot of the real creativity of the story comes out of those story sessions we all did together. But from those story sessions, then we divvy up who tells which bit, and then that's what we've been carrying through all the way to the end.
So it sounds like a really fun way to create a comic book.
Absolutely. It really is.
So before that, you were doing the backup stories on Batman, backups to Scott Snyder's run,
yes.
Of course. What's it like doing the backup story in a comic? Because they've come back now. In the past, they were the norm. How do you approach that? Because you've got a much smaller number of pages, much less panels to tell your story.
Honestly, it's weirdly freeing, and that's the strangest thing about it, is because you don't have to worry does this have a big fight scene? Does this hit all of the points a standard issue needs to hit? If it needs to be a small story that's just a conversation between 2 characters, it can be that. If it's a creepy thing that's sort of moving through the back corners of Gotham, it can be that. All it needs to be is what it needs to be, and typically it's a singular motion, a singular scene that can sort of encapsulate and complement the tone of the main story. So honestly, I've done so many of them by now. It's just I love doing them. I'm actually back on the backups on Batman, starting with issue 35 for Endgame. For the duration of that story arc. So, and I'm getting to work with some of the best artists in the industry. The first one, particularly artists who have worked in Gotham before. So the first one was with Kelly Jones. The second one is Graham Nolan.
What are the ears of Batman's cowl like?
Oh my God! In that one, it's playing much more with the horror side of Kelly Jones, so it might be playing a bit more into his Sandman toolbox than that, but even that is absolutely amazing.
He's got a break the record for the longest cowl, for the longest point ears, because I just love. I mean, I go back and read old Kelly Jones Batman's run from the 90s, because I just think at one point he bent it around to fit in the panel.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other guys we have on that are John McCrae, Sam Keith, and Dustin Nguyen coming in the last one. So we have sort of this great array of Bat artists.
You got to write the Talon character as well, which must have been just an amazing experience, because a new Batman villain who just blew everyone away. How was that?
It was really, really fun getting to play with what Scott established in the Court of Owls storyline, because I think the Court of Owls in general and the Talons, those, I think in recent years, they're probably one of the most iconic brand new characters that have been introduced into the mythos. And the fact that I was able to jump in on that story first in the backups and then in my own spin-off series, Talon, I got to really establish more of their history and play into why they're some of the scariest villains in Batman's Rogues Gallery. And that's just absolutely, it's incredible to be able to build something like that, to build up something so new and make it into something that's been a part of Gotham forever.
When you consider that a lot of Batman writers like Grant Morrison and James Robinson love to deep dive into the history and grab something old that we don't know about, to create something like Talon and to go with that becomes iconic and stands up against, the best Rogues Gallery ever, it's a fantastic effort. It really was a great story. Now, you've written Jason Todd through The Outlaws, and of course you've written Nightwing as well, so you've written Dick Grayson. Fundamentally, what's the difference between those two characters? Both been Robin, but both very different guys.
Well, what I'll say is I'm going to throw Tim Drake in the mix, because
fair enough. Yep.
Tim is the Robin I grew up with. He's the one I love the most. And I always thought about it in the terms of especially before Damian came into the mix and all of that, I always would think of the three of them representing the three most important parts of Bruce. Dick Grayson represents Bruce's compassion. That is his, the fact that he cares so much about everyone around him, even when he's not good at portraying that or letting them know. You don't do what Batman does without caring with the full extent of your heart and mind. Jason represents his rage and his passion in general. It's the intensity behind Batman. It's the fact that sometimes he can lose himself in that darkness and he can lash out, but it's an important part of him. Batman needs that fire within that sometimes can't be controlled, that he's always trying to hold back. And that unpolished and pure is Jason. Jason is that rage. He is that intensity. And Tim is Bruce's intellect. He's the calmed, reasonable. He's the one where, Batman's superpower is planning. Tim's superpower is also planning. Like, he is the guy who he can walk into a situation and he knows how to act. He knows exactly who everyone in that room is and he's formulating how to take each one of those people down because he needs to. He can't rely on instinct as much as the others because he's not as strong a fighter because he doesn't have that background. He is much more of a thinker. And so the three of them together, they perfectly complement themselves into a full image of Bruce. So that's always been my Robin theory.
So you are the perfect person to ask then, because my son always asks me, who would win in a fight between them?
Of the three Robins? Oh, boy.
You're qualified now.
Yeah. That's a really tough one.
A 6-year-old back in Tasmania needs to know.
Yeah. I would say probably Dick Grayson. I think that the reason why is that his physicality, like his fighting is flawless. His body moves as, fluidly with his mind. He doesn't have to think when he fights. Jason needs to think, and Jason relies on weapons. Tim needs to think. Dick can just react, and he is in the moment. So it's more, he can make that first leap faster than the other ones can even think about it. And this is saying, this is coming out of pure love for all three of them. But yeah.
So segueing into Damian Wayne, is he coming back?
I can't. Read Robin Rises.
Is he coming back? I've got a Batman writer here. I need to ask.
Yeah. I mean, like, Damian's a great character, and the story that Pete Tomasi is building over in Batman and Robin through the whole Robin Rises thing, like, it's an amazing thing that now we have, like, now for Batman's 75th anniversary, we have Endgame launching in Batman, we have Batman Eternal reaching a real high point, and we have Robin Rises, which is like the most bombastic story that Pete has ever told in the pages of Batman and Robin. So we have, we're firing on all cylinders. And I think, there's going to be things that are going to really excite people coming out of all of the stories.
Speaking for my people, it's a great time to be a Batman fan. It really, really is. Just quickly, whose work are you liking at the moment? Obviously, outside of the Bat stable, what sort of stuff are you interested in?
Oh, wow. I mean, there's a lot of really amazing stuff happening across the board. I think this is legitimately one of the most exciting times to be a comic book reader ever. I mean, I do a little bit of work, not a little bit, I do a lot of work over at Boom Studios, and I think that they have an amazing stable of, I love Lumberjanes. That's a strange little series they're doing there that has a kind of all ages feel, but isn't like anything that's existed before. I love what's happening over at Image. I love Saga. I love Lazarus. There are just so many. It's The Wicked and the Divine. There are just so many amazing books coming out from every corner of the industry. It's not just like I love the diversity of story that's happening right now. I think it's just one of the most exciting times to be a reader in the entire history of comic books.
Like it is the best time ever to be a Bat fan. James Tynion IV, thank you so much for talking to Nerdzilla.
Thanks for having me.